Let me tell you a story of a case I worked on some time back. I was approached by this lady. She was in total utter shock, and she was completely devastated as to how she went to the land registry only to find out that she had a forged title. Imagine, she had just spent 100 million. What would you do if you found yourself in such a circumstance? In today's video, I thought it prudent to sensitize people on incidents of fraud so that at least we can reduce on the number of cases of fraud that happen day to day. Hi, my name is Joan.A, and I'm a lawyer. Welcome back to Law with Joan. If you're new on this channel, we talk about law and current events. We talk about how the law affects current events, and we talk about how current events affect the law and shape the law. Buying land in Uganda is a current event that happens every day. At least one falls a victim of fraud every day. So if you're planning to buy land, this is your video. Please stick around. Fraud is a series of acts that is intended to cheat and dispossess one of their property. So a series of acts, what do we mean? A series of acts, we mean acts that amount to what they call fraud. These acts end up leading to someone losing their land and the fraudster benefiting financially eventually. So we have what we call administrators and executors of land. We have had times whereby administrators and executors have abused their powers. Who are administrators? Administrators are legal representatives of the estate of the deceased. What do? They manage the estate on behalf of the beneficiaries left behind. Who are beneficiaries? Beneficiaries, these are dependents that are left behind when someone passes on. Let's say the husband of the family passes on. The beneficiaries would be the wife, the children. So you get to find that some administrators or the executors, a point to note, administrators come in where a will is not left behind in the family. And then executors come in where a will is left behind in the family. So you find that these people, some of them, not all, they tend to abuse their powers by transferring the land title into their names and eventually selling it to other people. Before you know it, the dependents are not aware that actually the land was sold. And they wake up to realize that someone else is already the land owner. So that amounts to an act of fraud. So how can you avoid fraud in this particular circumstance? When you're buying land and it's administered by an administrator, what do you have to look out for? That you have to go to the court that granted letters of administration to the administrator to verify, so that at the end of the day, you're dealing with a legitimate contract, not a fraudulent contract. Another thing that you have to do is you have to also do your due diligence and find out which beneficiaries are on that land or who have an equitable interest in that land. Because you could buy this land one day and wake up and a beneficiary puts a caveat on your land. Why? They have an equitable interest under the law and they can lodge one. Another common incident that has been abused gravely under the law to amount to fraud is power of attorney. Power of attorney. What is power of attorney? A document that gives someone powers to act on behalf of someone in matters regarding to land. So, under the law, under Section 146, a landowner has a right to appoint anyone to act on their behalf as regards to a lease, as regards to transfer of land, as regards to a mortgage. Looking at the case of Frederick Zawe versus Orient Bank and others, courts in that case noted that the defendant had taken advantage and forged powers of attorney and transferred the land title into his names and sold the land to another party, thereby the rightful owner losing their party. That act itself amounts to fraud at the end of the day. When you're dealing with land whereby you find there is someone who has been chosen to act on behalf, you have to confirm with the donor, that is the real owner of the land. Today, Ministry of Lands has included some reforms to guard away with fraud or to reduce the incidence of fraud. Today, before land can be transferred, the registrar has to first see the sole proprietor of the land before land can be transferred under such circumstances. Another incident of fraud is forged titles. Now, most of these titles sometimes come from NASA, and these titles completely look the same as the ones produced at the titles office. And sometimes we have had incidences whereby fraudulent land officials forge these very titles, some, not to be precise, some, not all of them. So you get to find that someone ends up buying, I could say, air at the end of the day. Forgery is an example of an act that amounts to fraud. Another incident that I can give you is titles in wetlands. Under our laws, we are not supposed to have titles in wetlands. Actually, it's not permitted. But guess what? Fraudsters go and create titles in these wetlands and go ahead and sell to people. To those who are naive, they end up buying and end up in a very complicated situation. This is an example of an incident that amounts to fraud. Another example that I could share with you is double titling and double plotting of land. What is double titling and double plotting of land? Double titling of land is where you find that there is more than one title on the same parcel of land or the same piece of land, which is not possible because it cannot happen. A parcel of land cannot have more than one number, but you get to find that when someone is trying to be fraudulent, they are going to create more than one plot number on a parcel of land. You're going to find the same title having plot number 100, then you have the same title having plot number 200. That's how you can get to know that you have a fraudulent title in existence. Another example of fraud is selling matrimonial property without the consent of your spouse, especially matrimonial property that is jointly owned together and was jointly purchased together. Remember, fraud is where someone is intentionally perverting the truth, meaning in such circumstances you're going to find a spouse forging a signature of the other spouse to make it seem like the other spouse gave consent for the land to be sold. That's another example of a fraudulent incident. Another example that manifests today is official estates. I could give an example of the Buganda Kingdom. You get to find that under official estates, you need consent before you sell land from the authority. Under Buganda Kingdom, the Kabaka of Buganda gives authority to enable sale of land under his estate. And there are powers of attorney. There are people who act on behalf of the official estate, but you get to find that fraudsters actually get to forge consents and sell land. So you get to find that you end up being a victim of fraud easily without even knowing it. Another example is estates. I could give an example of real estates. You can find that an estate in Uganda, in Kampala, could be worth 1 billion. And you find that the fraudster is reducing it to 50 million. Lying is an act that can amount to fraud, because fraud is the intentional perversion of the truth. So if you lie about the value of an estate, that alone amounts to fraud. So if you get involved in such a transaction, or if you carry out such a transaction, you automatically become a victim of fraud. Another example of fraud is upon completing paying the purchase price of the land. When you're paying stamp duty of this land, when you underdeclare the amount that you paid for this land, that also amounts to fraud.